Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brennan Black, and if you guys caught the last episode, you saw that it was the first part to our discussion about urbanization. So make sure you guys go back and check out that episode if you haven't yet, just to kind of give you like what happened in the last episode. We went over the first 2 points of our 3-point discussion. We talked about urbanization from rural areas to more city areas. We talked about urbanization from people that are moving from more rural lifestyles to more urbanized and city lifestyles. And so in this next point, we're going to be talking about ag literacy and what can be done to help slow down the effects of urban sprawl and that kind of thing. And once again, I apologize for having to split this into a two-parter. We didn't really mean to, but we just kind of got carried away and started talking for a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I'm just going to give it to Abby and I right here. So enjoy, guys. So we're going to kind of transition into our third point here because that's kind of going along the lines of what we're talking about here, and that's
the consequences.
The consequences of having all this urbanization and all this urban sprawl going on. And that's not to say that we can stop it, because we can't. In all honesty, urbanization is something that's going to happen. It's something that's extremely natural for a civilization to do.
And it's not like the give-up attitude. It really cannot be fixed.
Right. There's no possible way. We're not going to force people to stop living in houses. That's not going to happen. We cannot force businesses to stop building facilities. We cannot force cities to stop growing because the population is growing. I mean, we're supposed to plateau at around 10 billion in 2050, and it's supposed to decrease after that. So maybe we might see a lack of urban sprawl at that point, but there will still be urbanization, and it's not like we're going to be reducing our cities back into farmland. That's not something.
No.
Once we go to city land, we're not going back to farmland possibly ever.
Go back.
Like there's. And that's something is very scary for a lot of farmers to accept, but
it's the truth.
Yeah, I think there's more harm in trying to deny it than there is trying to accept it and adapt to it.
I agree.
Because there are ways to adapt to this growth. It's not that that we're just doomed to be stuck in it and all of our farmland is going to be taken away one day. It's not that that's going to be an issue that we're going to be facing, at least not for a long time. There are ways to adapt to this. And, well, that's the issue. Urbanization is not the issue. Urban sprawl is the issue. We can slow down urban sprawl. Urbanization will never be stopped, but we can slow down the urban sprawl part of it, and that's where that's the direction that we need to go. And some of the ways that this urban sprawl issue can be fixed is, there's a program called Smart Growth. It's something the EPA kind of talked about, and it's not necessarily like a program like they're putting it in place. It's kind of like a concept, just
throwing around an idea,
right?
Build upon it.
Yeah, they're just concepts to say, well, what if we did this? Maybe this will work.
So, what is the Smart Growth program? I don't think I've ever heard of it.
So Smart Growth, to put it in layman's terms, is kind of just like it's a list of different acts that we can do that help reduce the amount of farmland that's being taken up, and it'll still allow for urbanization to occur. And what I mean by this is like, so to give you an example, infilling. You know what infilling is?
No.
So infilling is...
no, I'm being completely honest. Like, I'm not just saying that for the viewers.
No.
But,
this is why I wanted to bring you instead of Evan on this episode, which partially because Evan's still in Portugal, because, thanks, Evan.
It's cool. It's all right. We get it. We need to take vacation sometimes. That's I feel you.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. He's going to come back, and he's going to be coming on all kinds of episodes with us. But Evan knows this topic like the back of his hand, because we studied this forever for our speaking team. I wanted to bring you in here because I knew that it's very unlikely that you would
have a lot of knowledge.
Have that kind of background knowledge, because a lot of your knowledge is more in production agriculture and less in fixing stuff like this.
Right.
Yeah. So infilling is when you take, like, let's say a target decides to just clean out, like, let's say like we have Super Target here in Tulare. Let's say that they decide to move out, like they don't want to have a Target in Tulare anymore.
What?
Let's just say that they left.
That better not happen. I love Target. They moved everything around. It's messing me up.
I know.
Okay, sorry.
Let's just say that they...
But keep going. Okay.
That they moved.
So they're out. Okay.
They're gone.
Target's gone.
Instead of, like, let's say that Walmart wants to build another Walmart in Tulare. Instead of building a whole new building, they take over the Target's old building. That's infilling. So it's instead of...
Well, that's practical. That's just how it should be anyways.
Right. But a lot of businesses don't do that. They want to build whole new facilities, and it's heavily encouraged that they go fill up old abandoned facilities instead.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or another example, which I've heard this before, but this is a little bit harder to implement, is that they take an old building, like let's say that that Target gets abandoned.
Okay.
They take the old building and they turn it into like an apartment complex.
Okay.
Or they turn it into, because that that Target's got a huge parking lot. They could take up a lot of that parking lot
for sure.
and turn it into an apartment complex. Like, that's something that's a little bit less...
Well, they could build on top of that, too.
Right. So, like, it's something that's a little bit less thought of in terms of, let's turn an old company into living area. They usually turn it into another company, but it'd be something that would help reduce the amount, because people always want to build new houses. Like we were talking about earlier, people want bigger houses, and it's not that they're trying to take out farmlands, but they want bigger, nicer stuff.
House. Yeah.
So if we use that land, instead of building a whole new land and taking out some guy's farm to do that, we would
just build on what's already built upon.
Right, so
that makes sense.
That's one concept that Smart Growth proposes. Another one is...
I really like that. That's a good idea.
So, yeah, and Smart Growth proposes a lot of
Good job for whoever came up with that.
Smart Growth proposes a lot of these concepts to try to reduce the amount of urban sprawl that's occurring. Not to say it's going to stop it, but it helps kind of aid the issue.
That definitely slows it down.
And so we have, like, more concepts like building up instead of out. And that's instead of building wider houses, we start building more, like, 2- and 3-story houses or larger, especially with apartment buildings. Instead of building, like, the flat apartments, we start building stacked apartments. You know, just because it reduces the amount of land that has to be taken up, and it still allows for that urbanization to occur.
Well, you definitely see that a lot in Europe because, like, when my dad and I went there in November, we went into Holland because we have a lot of family there. We went to Agritechnica, which is the largest indoor farm show. We have the World Ag Expo. Okay. This is way bigger than that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's
extremely
massive.
That's crazy.
The smallest building was at least 12 acres.
Jeez.
And so, but the Ag Expo's I don't remember the number now, but it's way bigger. Okay, anyways. So that was in Germany, and then in France, my dad and I, we went to Paris for the day. But just to look at that, the shortest apartment or house was 3 stories.
Wow.
Because, I mean, same thing in all of the European countries, is that their houses are so tiny and compact, but they're built up. And my cousin, she recently moved into a new apartment. Her staircase is almost completely vertical.
Dang.
You have this tiny little curve, but the stairs are less than 6 inches wide. And so kind of everything is being built up because they can't go out anymore because everything else is already built. And they don't want to take over that farmland because they grow tulips there, they have dairy farms, sheep, horses, that kind of thing, pasture. So they have to grow everything up, and it doesn't go out anymore. But like especially in France, like they were building a new 5-story complex that was absolutely massive.
It's crazy.
But that was all apartments.
Right.
Because more people want to live there.
Yeah, and there's always an argument against that, saying, like, if you look at, especially a lot of places in Italy, they have really compact houses, and it's really hard to have any room to move. Right. And that's understandable. But that's not to say that, like, in Tulare, we're going to have that much compactness, because the reason that it's like that, and especially in a lot of European countries, is because there's such a high demand for living in Europe. Like, so many people want to live in Europe, as opposed to...
And there are a lot of people that want to live here, but not specifically in the Central Valley, so I don't really see that coming here.
No, yeah, they usually want to live in, like, San Francisco or New York and a lot of, like, more populated areas.
But that's why they have very tall buildings.
Right. Like, you see very few standalone houses in New York, for example. It's almost all apartments.
Yeah.
And a lot of the houses are in, like, the outskirts, more towards the agricultural areas. And it's the same thing with, like, Kentucky. I mean, you go to Louisville, everything is hotels and apartments.
Really?
Like, if you go to, like, the outside skirts of it, it's all farmhouses. Like, those are the only actual houses you see. They're all, like, farming, and they don't even have fences. Weird. They don't have fences. They don't lock their doors. Everything is very open, and it's because everyone trusts each other, and then you go into Louisville, you have to lock your cars and everything, because, you know, not to say Louisville's a dangerous area, but because it's more urban, there's a higher risk. So, that's another... that's something that Smart Growth kind of proposes as well, is you start building up or more vertical instead of more horizontal, and then that way it kind of preserves a lot of the potential outgrowth that will be occurring. And there's a lot of other concepts that can be implemented from the Smart Growth program. I could list them all day because they have a ton of them, but those are kind of the more popular ones that are usually proposed, and when people say that we should start using Smart Growth ideas. And Smart Growth, like I said, it's not something that's being implemented a ton right now. There are cities that are trying to implement more of these ideas,
but as long as it's started,
right? And the EPA,
it'll come around.
What's actually kind of interesting to me is the EPA is the one that proposes. I think it's because they want to preserve a lot of the natural land that's being taken up by cities, which makes sense.
Specifically agricultural land, but,
right?
But they're still trying to preserve, which makes a difference.
Yeah, no, I'll take that over nothing. And there is another kind of interesting story I want to share with you guys before we move into the ag literacy side of this, and that's that there is this program called Pegasus. Have you ever heard of Pegasus, Abby?
from Hercules?
No, not the flying horse.
Okay,
so
no.
Pegasus,
no, I have not.
And that's okay because it's actually a very small idea. I'm not even sure if it's actually being used yet. I think it's something that's still a lot of brainstorming is going on with this idea. And this is an idea that they're trying to implement in Chicago, Illinois. And what this is they actually implement a 100-acre farm in the middle of Chicago. In the middle of a large city, they want to implement a 100-acre farm.
Do they have room for that?
Here's the thing. In the middle of a lot of large cities, they usually have parks or golf courses or something along those lines.
So they're going to rip out one of those and put farmland there?
Right. And not to say they're going to rip it out, but in a lot of, as cities start to grow, they like to take out the middle of the cities and put something along those lines to try to keep the natural aspect to it.
Okay.
Instead of implementing a new golf course or instead of implementing a new park, they'd rather implement a large 100-acre piece of farmland. And here's the kicker. Here's the part that I like about it, because there's a lot of controversy over how this should be done. What they are going to do with this farmland is they're going to use it to teach the inner city kids about agriculture. They're going to bring those inner city kids and have
them...
They're
going to use 100 acres, though? That seems a little much.
There's a lot of schools in Chicago.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but...
I mean, like, and it's not going to be like 100 acres of just dairy. It's going to be, like, divided into different types of farmland.
Well, no, it needs to be separated, yeah.
Because that way they can teach
You can't
kids...
just teach about crops.
Right.
There's more than just that.
That way they teach kids about all kinds of different... It's like a school farm, but it's 100 acres. And it helps... I mean, it's partially to alleviate a lot of the urban sprawl. It still allows for agricultural production in the city.
But it's really smart that they can bring in and teach children.
Right, and that was like the main purpose of it, because just to give you guys a little bit of a story, I gave a speech on urbanization in one of my speech contests for FFA, and the actual question I had to answer was about urban agriculture. What are some examples or what are some pros to urban agriculture? And it's something that I was struggling to answer because the only urban agriculture I could think of was rooftop gardens, which is another form of...
Or hydroponics.
That's what I was thinking. Which I brought hydroponics into it, but hydroponics has kind of been proven to not be as efficient as...
I agree.
As actual agriculture. I mean, rooftop gardens are kind of along the same lines. I mean, they're not that efficient, but they still exist.
It still helps, yeah.
So, my main selling point for this speech was the Pegasus program. I talked about how Pegasus was implementing agriculture into cities rather than just have it on the outskirts of cities.
So when could this begin, or potentially begin?
That's kind of the difficult part about it, because they actually asked me a question along those lines. Like, is this already in the process of being implemented, or is it something that's still being brainstormed? And from what I understand, this hasn't been started yet. And the reason it hasn't been started yet is because they need Chicago's approval, and because Chicago's a more... democratic area, they tend to not
more time.
Right, they tend not be as supportive of that kind of endeavor because they don't want to take up all that city land and put a farm right there because for various reasons. I also got asked the questions of is this financially feasible? Like, is it something that is worth investing in, or is it something that you're going to lose your money if you try to do it? And the question, or the way I tried to answer that was this isn't for productive quality. It's not to say that we can farm in cities, money. Right? And because the direction they wanted me to go with it was, well, no, it's there's no feasibility.
If there's no profit, then what's the point?
Right, and the kind of the direction I went similar to that direction. I said, well, no, you're not gonna make money if you're just hoping for this thing to produce food, because that's not what it's for.
You actually need to try.
You have to look at it from an outside perspective. This is for education purposes, which can in turn help reduce the urban sprawl rates that we're at, and it could help preserve farmland, which will help produce more food.
Well, like in the short term, if you have schools like helping to fundraise or provide money to help with this type of project, if the schools in the city are willing to put money towards that, the short term would be like, we need some like extra cash.
Right.
The city would be able to help out with that, but in the long term, I think it would be a lot more beneficial because then you have these students that are much more educated and more willing to support programs like that in the future when they will have their future children.
Absolutely.
And so I think people need to definitely look at that from that standpoint and not just one way.
Right, and that's kind of the way I had to talk to the judges about this, because like I said, that they're looking more towards the short term, like you were saying. They were saying, well,
no, you need to look long term. You can't look short term.
They're saying like within the next few years, will I be able to get my money back? I said, no, you won't. But you can't look at it like that. You have to look at it from
any type of farming. If you started a farm right now, you wouldn't make your money back in a few years.
No. And
especially like the guys putting in pistachios and almonds. They go in debt for a little while because those trees don't produce for the first few years. You have to wait. Right,
and I had to explain to them, it's very important to look at this from the aspect of we're educating the future generations that are going to support these kinds of projects in the future. It's all about looking ahead. You cannot look at this from the perspective of, is this going to pay me back soon? No,
well, you can't look at it in the present. Even if you do look in the future, you have to look further. You can't just look a few steps ahead.
Like, I told them, I said, you may never get paid back from this farm, but your future generations, your kids and their kids, they will heavily benefit from these aspects, especially if urban sprawl continues at the rate it is. Because at that point, let's say we do get to the point where we run out of farmland, where all urbanization takes over, which is not going to happen for a very long time if it ever does.
It won't happen.
But let's say, like, hypothetically it does. That program, like, let's say, like, somebody says, well, this worked in Chicago, let's implement it in these other cities. And these other cities will start to implement more agriculture-based projects.
Do they only want to start in Chicago? Do they want to start in other cities as well?
I think they want to start in Chicago just because that's one of the largest gaps between the consumer and the farmer that we've ever seen. Like, Chicago is so far from agriculture. Because you can start in New York, but you go just a few miles outside of New York and there's dairies everywhere.
Yeah.
You can start in San Francisco, you go just a few hours down south to the Central Valley and there's agriculture right there. Chicago, it's hard to find agriculture.
That makes sense.
I mean, there's land around it that's agriculturally based, obviously, but it's not nearly as productive as what we have here.
I agree.
So I think that's a more strategic play on their part because Chicago, for one, it's so big. It's hard to get out of Chicago.
Huge. Chicago's huge.
So it's good to bring in something like that towards the middle of Chicago because so many people are going to see it and wonder what it's about, and they're going to have to teach them about agriculture for them to even live there.
Yeah, we had a dairy convention there 3 years ago, and it took them at least 3 hours to go find a dairy.
Yeah, no, it's hard. Like there's so much city there,
and I think that a couple of them weren't even in Illinois. Like they were out of the state.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that's just kind of like another potential project that Smart Growth has kind of played a role in.
It's pretty cool. I like it.
So we're talking a little bit about ag literacy and teaching kids about agriculture and that kind of thing, and that can actually help alleviate all the urban sprawl that's been going on lately. I think at least. I think if kids understand, or even adults, if anyone understands where their food comes from, they'll be less.
That's a step in the right direction.
Right. They'll be less willing to take up all that farmland because they'll understand that they need it. And
that, or they support their local FFA program, their 4-H chapter.
I think
just programs like that. I think they would be more willing to support.
Right. And I think the hard part about that is they can understand where their food comes from and they can support FFA, but they still might want to build a bigger house and take up farmland without even meaning to, because they don't realize what building that bigger house actually does. So I think that we need to go in there and say, hey, we understand you want a bigger house, but maybe you should build it 2 stories instead of, making it 3,000 square feet because you're taking up this guy's farmland and we need that farmland. And there was a hypothetical situation that Kawhi liked to trap me with every time I gave this speech, and it really bugged me because I know he's right. He gave the situation that if you were a farmer, if you had 100 acres or let's say just, like 80 acres of corn or some crop,
okay,
and a large corporation attempted to buy you out for twice as much as you would ever earn on that farm.
Right.
Would you do it?
No.
So I told him the same thing. I said, no, I want to preserve it for my future generations. I want to keep it going because we need that food over the land. And he said, I agree, or he said, I appreciate your passion and you're willing to support the agriculture industry, but most farmers, as much as they would want to say no, they would say yes, because that much money could support their family for generations to come, and that farm won't necessarily do the same. And it's hard to convince a farmer, as much as they want to keep that farming in their blood and in their family and keep the tradition going and to keep just feeding the world, sometimes it's not always a good thing to do because, like, let's say your well runs dry, or let's say that the economy goes down. You're going to lose so much more money that you could have gained from taking that deal.
Well, then what are you going to do afterwards? You sell your company and do what?
You just sell
you sell your farm and then you do what?
Then you move into the city, I guess.
But why? What are you going to do then? My dad's test driving retirement right now. He hates it.
Well, that's the thing about it, though, is, like, it's not necessarily, like, I sat there and argued with him forever, and he would not budge. His argument was 100% that because I said, well, what about the future generations? You have to think about the future. He said,
if I think about farmers that I know personally that we go and sit with at lunch every day during work.
Right.
We go sit and talk to them. I don't care how much money they would make off of a company that would want to try to buy their land. They wouldn't do it.
Right, and I agree with that.
Because there's no point in having all this money and sitting at home. Or having all this money and then buying a bigger house. They would rather work as hard as they can all day long and come home to their family than be bought out by somebody else and still sit at home with their family. They have nothing to benefit from that except for the money. And even then, Money doesn't make you happy. Them working on their farm or working with their crops and their animals is making them happy, and the money isn't.
And I made a very similar argument to Kwan, and his response was, looking at the future generations, the farmer wouldn't be looking to what makes him happy, he'd be looking forward to what would make his kids and grandkids benefit the best and have the best lives they could. And in that sense, if the economy is going down, he sees that, and he sees that his crops are not going to benefit as well. It can only go down
so far.
Right. But there's always a degree. I mean, look at 2009. You had dairy farmers committing suicide because they couldn't keep up. That, like, if something that dramatic happens again, it's hard to say that you wouldn't get bought out. It's something that's hard to argue, but it's something that I would like to think that most farmers would not get bought out. But if that deal comes along and there's no better option, I mean, literally nothing that could beat that, then I'd hate to say that, but there would be a lot of farmers that would say, all right, fine.
But I think the only way that farmers would say, okay, fine, is if they truly believe their children could not uphold the family business.
Right.
That would be the only reason, I believe.
Because
I personally know a lot of farmers, and they wouldn't give up their livelihood for anything.
And I agree with you there. But that's just something that that's a situation that is potentially going to be coming in the future. Not that I say it will, but if urban sprawl continues at the rate it is, if we do nothing to stop it, if we do nothing to slow it down, then that's a situation that a lot of farmers could be facing in the future. And let's say that they don't get bought out. Let's say that they just keep doing what they're doing. Eventually, like, let's say they have a kid and the kid doesn't want to go into farming. He sells the land for a lot less than it could have been worth, and then they just screwed over the future generations. So it's a matter of, because there are kids that they can grow up with farming all they want. They be taught every single aspect of farming, and they still don't want to do it. I mean, I know kids that want to go on, they don't even want to touch another farm in their lives, and they grew up, like, living and working on a farm, and they don't want to do it. And it's hard to say that...
I think that happens more often than you think.
Right. It's hard to say that it's... The problem I have with that situation is that it's so specific, but... Like, let's say that this guy has a kid that he knows isn't going to go into farming. Is it worth keeping that farm alive if he could rather pay for that kid's future because he knows that there's no way he's going to be able to convince that kid to take over the farm? I mean, I had a friend that, actually I'm not going to name names, but he had a family member who had a farm who passed it on to his son, who was this kid's dad. And the dad didn't want to go into the industry because he saw the economy going down the drain, and so he sold it all off. And... my friend wanted to get back into farming, but it was a smarter option at the time for his dad to sell off the farm because it helped them out in the long run, which is hard to argue, and I think that he should have kept it. But if he would have, it's hard to, like, I don't think that they'd be nearly as well off as they are now.
But in the long run, like, if you look at it, it's so much, it would be easier for him now to inherit the farm than start something new, because he will spend at least 3 times the money to start a new farm.
Right, and I agree. And that's why he won't get into farming now. As much as he wants to, he can't. If he would have inherited the farm, he would have been able to pick himself off.
Unless he tried... Yeah, no, he can't buy it off of somebody else. Like my uncle, he farms with his father-in-law, who is obviously his wife's dad.
Right.
So they farm together, and he wanted to buy him out because whenever he passes, like, my uncle would inherit the farm.
Right.
Or the dairy farm. He couldn't do it. Even if he had a partner, they could not invest that much money to buy out his father-in-law.
It costs a lot. And that's, I think, a lot of the issue as to why farmers are getting out of farming these days. And I think that urban sprawl has partially a cause in that, but I think this just the ag economy, the legislation that's in place, the regulations, especially in California, that's just causing so many people to just drop out, and that's just leading. I mean, it's just a domino effect. I mean, you have Prop 2, you have all the water regulations, you have all the pesticide regulations, and there are so many farmers that drop out just because of those reasons. Not even because the economy is bad, but because the regulations are so harsh that they can't even profit off of what they're doing. Yeah. And so I think that that's something that's dangerous to the agricultural industry, because that leads to their future generations not knowing where ag comes from, because that's where that's where our generation, the kids that are our age that don't know about farming, that's where their lack of knowledge comes from, is that their grandparents sold off the farm because it was more profitable or because it was better for their family, and now their grandkids don't know what farming is.
But I think, like, if we implement more ag literacy, like the Pegasus program, having the ag knowledge for those children and the students, when they do grow up, and if they so choose to go into politics, they have that ag background that says, hey, we saw this when we were kids. This isn't practical. We need to change this. Unless it's changed prior to that. But I'm sure at that point in the future, there will be people who are suffering severely from regulations, and that those kids will be able to change it.
Right. No, and I agree. I think that's what our role kind of comes into now, which is helping educate those generations so they can go on and fix a lot of the issues that are facing agriculture today, which is easy for us to say this, the next generation's job to do it, but in all honesty, it kind of is. I mean, we can only do so much to educate them. There's not much that we can fix as much as we want today. Like, we can try to get into politics and try to fix the regulations now, but because of how long-term those regulations are, it's going to be up to our kids to probably go in and redo all the damage that's already been done. Even if we get those regulations stopped, even if we reduce the amount of urban sprawl that's going on, and even if we increase the ag literacy rate, it's going to be up to the next generation to go on and fix all the damage that's been done.
Then. Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of why we need to get a jump started on it today, is just, we need to do our role in trying to fix what we can and just let them fix it as years go on. And I think that's kind of the issue, is every generation says, well, the next generation can fix my generation's mistakes. And that's a very dangerous statement to make. I mean, if we make mistakes, we should fix them to the best of our ability. But like I said, there's only so much we can do. And then we have to let them take it on from there. So I think that us talking about this issue and kind of informing the public about it a little bit more is something that's very beneficial to the issue itself. And like I said, the smart growth program or the smart growth concepts might not fix what's going on. Us talking about literacy a lot and us spitting off some facts might not fix what's going on, but it kind of plants those seeds for future generations to come in and say, all right, well, here's where they went wrong, let's fix it. And I think that that's the best benefit that we can give to the future of agriculture, is that we're kind of planting those seeds and we're establishing a foundation for a higher education of agriculture for those who don't know where the food comes from, or what the downside is having a bigger house, or what why so many farmers are dropping out of the market, or why their food costs so much. And we're teaching these people these things, which is great, but it comes to a point where we need to start having a call to action saying, all right, you guys need to go out and do this now. And I think that we don't have the voice, simply because, for one, we're too young, and for two, there's not really an audience for us just yet. We need to wait a few more years before we start giving a call to action and say, all right, it's your guys' turn to go out and fix those problems, because we can't do it anymore. And I think that's something that we need to kind of keep in mind as we go on with this episode, with other episodes, with any issues facing agricultural politics, that we can sit there and talk about what the issue is all we want. It's not going to get fixed until we have our call to action. And we're training the next generation to go in and fix not necessarily our mistakes, but the mistakes of previous generations, because that's all we can do. So I think that with that, we're gonna start.
That was a good episode.
We're gonna start closing off here. That was really good.
Yeah, I think that was a lot.
It was a lot. I didn't mean to go that in depth with all that, but
it needed to be said.
It needed to be said because this is the future of humanity we're talking about. I mean, we have a population of 9.7 billion. Like I said, it's supposed to plateau at 10 billion around 2050. There's got to be some way that we need to feed all those people, and even if it's not us producing the food, we need to help whoever we can understand it.
7.9,
them.
not 9.7.
No, 7.9 is right now.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're at 7.9. We're at 7.9 right now. It's gonna reach 9.7 within the next 30 years.
Okay.
So
I was all, that's supposed to be like 2050, but
yeah.
Right now, no, that's not how it goes.
Yeah, no.
Okay, sorry. Keep
going. Yeah, no. So in the next 30 years, we have all this food to produce, and even if we're not producing it,
it's gotta come from somewhere.
It's gotta come from somewhere, and that's why it's our job to kind of open that door for more people to do it. So. Yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now because my head hurts.
Get a little. Whew, that was a lot.
Yeah, and I think this is a good way to bring back the ag issues aspect of things, because I like the ag issues episodes because they get very.
They're fun.
Yeah, I mean they get very not heated, but it's like something like, this is our future. We need to fix it now. Like kind of episode. I think they're more fun that way because it gets people's attention.
I agree.
Because like if you teach someone in a classroom about urban sprawl, they're gonna get bored. But if you say, hey, you can fix our mistakes, and they're like, all right, well maybe, like it's something that's just like, you need to be a little bit more
We need to be proactive.
Right. And I think that's something that we do a good job of here. So I'd like to thank all of our loyal listeners. We are at 31 subscribers now, which is really exciting.
Yes. Tell your friends.
Yeah.
Subscribe, please.
I'm not sure if we've been doing this enough, but make sure you guys get as much support, because we have episodes that have 80 views and we only have 30 subscribers. So what's going on here, guys? That
doesn't add up. I'm really good at math, so the 50 of y'all are really like the 49 of y'all that aren't subscribing. Not to be rude, but like y'all should subscribe.
Well, I think the problem with it is we need to get it on more platforms.
We're working on it. Give us a break.
We have iTunes, we have Spotify that we're trying to get it on. As soon as it's on there, I will be blasting all kinds of promotions saying, hey, go follow us on these things, because it's easier to listen to.
But for right now,
we're on YouTube. That's our platform.
If you're working out, listen to this.
Yeah, so I'd appreciate if you guys would subscribe, just so you guys get notifications as well as when our new episodes come out, because we're going to be posting them every day on our social media sites, but there are some of our listeners that don't even have us on social media. And if you don't, that's another issue you need to go fix right now.
That's another issue you need to fix. That's cool. You're good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know. So, anyway, I'd like to thank all you guys for listening. Make
thanks.
sure that you recommend us to your friends, family, anyone that has an interest in agriculture, maybe those who don't have an interest in agriculture. We are open to all audiences.
Come find us.
And we would like you guys to, if you have anything that we didn't address in this episode that you want us to kind of address, get a hold of us. Shout us out on any of your social medias, private message us. We have all of our links in the description.
And there's a lot of people that know us, so if you don't know what our Instagrams or Facebooks, it's just our names.
Yeah, just Brennan Black, Abby Prinz, Evan Garcia, even Brandon Borba, our honorary co-host. Just get a hold of one of those guys. They'll get back to us, and we can talk about whatever you guys want us to talk about. If you have any recommendations for future episodes, we can talk about that. There are so many things that you guys have a role in this community in doing, and you guys just need to be a little bit more vocal about it. So that's my call to action. You guys need to be more vocal. Reach out to us and we can talk back to you. Help us help you. So
yeah,
that's our thing. And there's one more thing we kind of wanted to talk about before we sign off today.
Just
and
a little
so
a little fun.
That thing.
A little fun thing to throw in.
There's kind of a special activity that we're going to be doing possibly in July is kind of what we're predicting here.
Yeah.
And it's going to involve Abby, Evan, Brandon, and I. We're all going to be in a room together recording.
That could be interesting.
We're going to be doing a live stream.
Ooh.
And so on this live stream, we're on this live stream, we're going to be streaming on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere you can live stream, we will be live streaming.
Sweet.
And we're going to be having all kinds of people watching us if possible. We're going to be kind of doing...
So when this comes out, tell your friends to get on the live stream. Ask us questions. Tell us some comments. If you find statistics, we love numbers.
Right. The entire week up to the live stream, I will be just posting nonstop about it. So you guys better follow us so that you guys know when it'll be coming out. Because very special to this live stream is going to be a call-in episode. Just like on a radio show, we're going to have you guys call in and give us... And we're going to be reading the comments too. We're going to have you guys be calling in just like on a radio show, and if you guys have any questions you want us to address, we'll address those questions. There'll be 4 of us there, so we can talk about anything and have a conversation there. If there's a topic you guys wanted to address, if you guys want an episode idea you want to talk about, we can talk about it on that live stream. There are so many different things you guys can talk about. If you guys have any questions on another episode that you want to answer, we can answer it then. There's just so many directions that live stream could go. And we talked about it a little bit in our first episode. We kind of teased having a call-in episode. But I think it's something because...
Now it's getting more practical.
Right.
So...
we're getting bigger. We have a lot more support. We have a lot more listeners than we did when we started. And we have Abby and Evan and Brandon are all leaving soon to college. So, and we're going to be doing episodes, of course, when they're gone to college, but it's so much easier to have all 4 of us in a room together rather than having to try to Skype and have all of us on a live stream together.
That could get interesting.
That could be interesting.
So that's why we're doing the live stream now, before we go.
Right. So we're going to do it in the middle of summer. That way, once Abby goes off to Washington and Evan and Brandon go off to Cal Poly and I stay here in Tulare.
Oh, yeah, they're both going to Cal Poly, huh?
Right. So that way, once they're all gone... It won't be that big of a deal.
I'm not dying. I'm just moving to a different state for a little while.
I know, but it's going to be harder to manage getting all the episodes yet. I'm going to be doing interviews with people that probably by myself. Not like I don't do that anyway. But
Wow, way to just throw me under the bus.
I'm throwing you and Evan under the bus.
That's so rude. Sorry, I'm a little bit busy. Fine, next interview, I'll be there.
You better be. And next episode, we are having another interview, so you better be there. Just saying.
But it's a surprise. Y'all don't know who it is. Yeah, fine. We're just gonna leave it
at that. So yeah, we like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you. Even though we just spouted a whole bunch of information at you and kind of like yelled at you to like get on the move and like find some more people to follow us.
Yeah,
we still love you all.
You know what? It's fine. They appreciate it, and half of them probably aren't listening anymore anyway, because a lot of them tune off by now. But if you are listening, thank you for listening to the end. Thank you for tuning into this whole episode and tuning into all of our other episodes. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you. I think there's like a bell. Go like. It shows us that you appreciate. Comment on our videos. Because I like seeing comments. I like seeing everyone.
But like good comments.
Yeah, obviously.
But if you have bad comments, like talk to us privately.
Right. Yeah. If you guys have any
concerns,
anything
questions.
you want to argue about, then that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So we're gonna close it off here, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget.
If you ate today, thank a farmer.
That's my line.